right, everybody. So today on the podcast, we have Brian DeCosta. How we doing, Brian?
Amazing, man. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We got connected through Steve Hall. Anybody who hasn't seen that podcast should check it out as well, because I want to dive into some things that you mentioned on there specifically. Before we jump into it, any new guests, I'd like to start with a charity donation, and we just discussed a fund that you liked and something that recently happened. So if you want to go into that.
Yeah, I think that's really amazing you do that, man. Unfortunately, I mean, so as of yesterday, the CrossFit Games, I believe it was day one, and an athlete passed in one of the swimming events. It was a run swim. His name's Lazar Dukic, and his family has a GoFundMe up. Very unfortunate circumstance. I don't think necessarily there's anyone to blame. He was struggling through the water and he happened to drown, which has never happened in the CrossFit Games. So I've seen a lot of the athletes competing, sharing the family's GoFundMe to support him. So um, any donation anyone could make would be greatly appreciated for on behalf of his family.
Yep, and we will have a link down below if anybody wants to have that in there. Now, I know you mentioned you were originally more of an East Coast guy. Did you ever go to like Jersey Shore or anything like that?
No, no, I didn't. And it's funny you say that because I was just at a family reunion last month in Connecticut, and cousin's my cousin's boyfriend is from Jersey. He's in med school now in New York City, but they were talking to me. What is the beach that is very long and thin? It's an island in Jersey. It's very
I mean, there's Long Beach Island, and then I mean, but there's a lot of kind of
LBI, is that it?
yes, yeah, Long Beach
He
Island.
was
Okay,
he was raving to me about LBI, saying that
okay,
I need to make it out there.
yeah,
So
it
that's
is.
on the docket for next summer for me. So
Okay. Yeah, there's some solid
yeah.
beaches. I mean, we obviously got a bad rep from Jersey Shore, the show, for a
You
long
guys
time.
you guys have been roughing it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, but it's cool. It's nice. So like I'm in Pennsylvania now, but like, you're an hour from New York City. You're, very close to Philadelphia. If you got the beach, like I said,
Sure.
Jersey, I think has a bad rep in general, but there's a lot of cool stuff to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's on the list because they were shocked that I hadn't been to LBI.
Yeah, yeah. So I think you had mentioned on Steve's podcast, you're 33, right? And what year did you start lifting?
2008. So this would have been the tail end of junior year of high school. Graduated high school '09.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So we're the same age. So I'm 33, graduated in '09. I
Cool.
started lifting in 2005, which is why you and I are basically the same size, right? We got the same level of musculature and everything. So I think a lot of people who have either heard of you or like seen you on like Instagram and whatnot, obviously very impressed by the size. And I saw that you're actually going to be competing in the NPC. Is it next year?
Potentially. I'm weighing the options and what's most exciting now, but the idea, and there have been a handful of natural athletes, two or three in the last couple of years I've seen who've paved the way into getting an IFBB Pro card. So that's a likely scenario for me. Yeah,
Yeah, and just for people listening, just to clarify, so you're a natural bodybuilder, and the reason that would be significant is because NPC is an untested organization. And so
correct.
obviously the vast majority of competitors are using anabolic steroids and potentially other things as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I love natural bodybuilding. I believe in it wholeheartedly, and I'd like to expand the reach of the sport. And, since I've been conducting my coaching business online, that's been my goal. But then the idea starts to enter your mind. What if natural athletes can prove that they can hang with some of the enhanced guys? And that
Yeah.
idea has been pretty exciting.
How often is it that you get accused of not being natural these days? It's got to be all the time.
Yeah, daily basis.
Yeah.
Some usually young man is in my DMs, either just sending me the needles
Yeah, yeah.
or just sometimes, not this is not every day, but at least a couple times a week I'll get like a novel saying how out of integrity I am and how I should be ashamed of myself, and
Right, right, right.
I'm giving false hopes for young men. And I think a lot of angry young men primarily.
Yeah, it's one of the things. So I have a long video on my channel. It's like 40 minutes long, and it was kind of discussed within the evidence-based community a little bit. We had a few podcasts about it. And it was basically on the discussion of genetics. And sometimes you'll see somebody who's just like a total freak, and I see the instant accusations of steroids. And obviously I have no idea who is that is not on steroids. I mean, you can generally know who is got to be on steroids, right? If you're looking at Ronnie Coleman, of course, but you really can't see somebody say, "Oh, I know he's not on steroids," because there's plenty of small people who are on steroids, right?
Sure.
And when you look at the influence of genetics compared to steroids, obviously the difference is you can't dose genetics, right? You can obviously just keep increasing dose of anabolics and whatnot. But
Absolutely.
I think people often really underestimate how much of a factor or genetics can be, but just the variation among people, right? Like we live in a world where there are men who are 7 feet tall and who are 4'8", right? And
Right.
there's percentiles, and you're looking at now a sport that has grown to a very widespread audience, and so you're just going to have a higher and higher caliber of people come out of the woodwork and who are competing and whatnot. So to me, I mean,
Hmm.
unless somebody's really, really obvious, I usually try to withhold any sort of like judgment or accusations because you really don't know. And there's such a wide variety there.
Yeah, dude, that's beautifully said. And I think, the further I get into this, the more I open up to the idea that I just think genetics just plays such a freaking huge role. And it can be a gut punch for any, I think, bodybuilder, especially natural bodybuilder. Like, what I would love to be able to say, like, this is sheer hard work and determination, and I put in all the time, which is true.
I'm waiting for you to tell me that your only genetic gift is that you outwork everybody in the room. That's the line I just need. I was waiting for it, but no, not bad.
Self-made. That's another one in business. Just being, everyone says they're self-made. No, dude, like genetics is such a huge thing. Like I couldn't make an NBA team, obviously, even if I was that tall. I don't have the coordination for it. But yeah, I think it's an alignment. Like you said, a lot of more eyeballs are on the sport. Social media is a whole other thing. We can see every different shape, size, type of physique. I was inspired to get into natural bodybuilding pretty much through people I've met through social media and on the internet. Um, it's an alignment of a lot of factors. Um, that the talent has to meet the hard work. You have to be intelligent with it as well. Um, yeah, but like you said, I think yeah, it's both factors.
Right. And well, that's what's always hard about it is because I do understand, like I was, because obviously I'm making a little bit of a dig at some of the bodybuilders who say things like that. And it's
Sure,
tough because, I mentioned I got started when I was 14 and I didn't just casually lift. I mean, I got really heavily into it almost right away and I was very obsessed with it. And if I had an amazing response, I hate to say it, I probably would have been that person who said, "Oh, I'm bigger than everybody because of my hard work," because that was a
sure.
component. It was there.
Yeah,
And I would have been like, "Well, you're not working as hard as I am. That's the reason." And as you said, it's got to be both, like especially at the top level, right? Like everybody who would even have the potential to compete in the NPC naturally, of course, has to have the genetics, but also, that's not just going to casually happen after 5 to 7 years. Like that takes
no.
really dedicated effort.
I think you see the signs relatively early, at least just anecdotally. I I was a soccer player through high school, but I was always like poked at on the soccer team. It's like Brian's the jack kid with abs. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was that kid, even though I had never touched a weight yet, and all I did
Oh,
was
interesting.
cardio-based sports.
Yeah.
And then within the first year or two of weight training, I gained weight pretty quickly. So um, I knew I definitely knew and was getting the signs just from those comments from friends and stuff. Like my genetic propensity to put on muscle faster was definitely something I noticed early.
Yeah, and then of course, and this is where you really see both factors, magnify because if you look at in the case of the NBA players, right, they do well. Well, if you are doing well at something, you get the positive feedback and then you do more of it. So it just
Sure,
necessarily becomes the case that the people who are the most genetically gifted end up also working the hardest because if you don't have an aptitude for something, it would really be kind of illogical to just keep putting your whole life into it and just spinning your
sure.
wheels just to be, in this case, an average basketball player, right? So both end up kind
Absolutely.
of gravitating towards each other.
Absolutely, I agree. And that's true for myself as well. I think that positive reinforcement enriched my desire to go deeper in on the gym and really lean into it.
Yeah. let me ask you if you agree with this. So, what I would say is if I were to look at, say, you at 7 years into lifting or 5 years, whatever it is, and I'm sure at that point you were already pretty freaky. And I've seen other examples where somebody said, like, wow, I'm really impressed by that person. And I would actually say that in that example, that individual I am not impressed with. And I'll give an analogy as to why. So imagine you and your buddy, you're both really into cars, and you for a year, you both learn everything you can about cars and you learn about racing. And then you get to the track and they get into a Porsche 911 Turbo S and you got a 1994 Camry and you both hit the pedal and they just mop the floor with you, right? Would you
Yeah,
say you're impressed with that person or that car, right? You're not really impressed with the person, but you are
sure.
impressed with that performance. Now, if that person then goes on and learns to be a professional racer. So in the case of you, at this point now, I'd say what you have done has become very impressive because it's now, 15 plus years into it. And especially, I mean, then you go into the NPC and all of that. But I do find that some people, especially on social media, they're almost like their mouth is watering over some of these people who they're really gifted, but they haven't done the impressive thing yet. And by example, Brad Loomis from 3DMJ.
Yeah.
So Brad Loomis, we've talked numerous times, great guy. He just competed at 52 years old, and I think he's 52. Got on
Hmm.
stage after, geez, I don't know, 30 years of lifting, and he competed at 158, and you guys are basically identical height. I'm
Yeah.
super impressed with him to have brought his best package
Dude.
at 52 years old. And like that's awesome. Even though by his own admission, maybe not the best genetics for the sport, wide waist and everything. So, and again, I'm obviously not taking away from you specifically because now you've gotten to that point. But
Sure.
anybody who's just naturally impressive within 5 years or they've done a craft for a few years, to me, it's like if I'm looking at the person, I look a lot at like their psychology, their dedication to something, and how much they have been able to put into it.
Yeah, no. Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, and I'm not one to judge, but I think, as you get older, or I guess pay more attention to this sport specifically, you start to vet who you draw inspiration from, and you recalibrate what you find like as impressive.
Yeah.
And like you said, I'm not impressed by, the girl who's got favorable fat distribution on social media, who's talking about going through a body recomposition, and oh my God, like she does a before and after and she gained 20 or 30 pounds and it's all in like her glutes and
Yeah,
legs.
right,
It's like, okay,
right. Yeah,
you can thank God and your parents for that. It's
yes.
not it's not this program that you're selling. I'm not so as much impressed with that. I'm impressed by last year when I was on stage and won my pro card in Boston. I competed against two dudes who were both 63 years old who looked freaking ridiculous. And one of their names has escaped me. One's name is Keith. Shout out to Keith, who owns a gym in Jersey, actually. Kent. Oh man, I'm being horrible with my names right now. I can share them after the podcast, but
Yeah,
these dudes were freaking shredded. They were jacked and just broke my brain in like the sense of what's possible. And they've been
yeah.
doing it and loving it for 30 plus years.
Does that make it harder in a sense? Like that's a good example, but I would almost wonder because I was just talking to a buddy about this yesterday. We were talking about business and as your income goes up and you're looking for people to maybe motivate you and whatnot. And what we said is it's sometimes hard to be impressed or motivated by somebody if they haven't done at least what you've done. And that is into like even maybe contrary to what I was saying before about it, obviously some people are just gifted and whatnot. I find that if you're looking at somebody who hasn't either one put in some amount of work, but even seen the results, it can be hard. So with you having such good results at this point, there's not, I mean, basically there's no natural bodybuilders who who are more impressive physique wise than you almost. So do you find that harder than to say like this, I'd be comfortable with this person coaching me, or are you able to step back and not make that comparison and just try to look at the knowledge standpoint?
So to clarify on your question, do I find it harder to like give trust or derive inspiration or motivation or be willing to be coached by someone because I may have better results than them? Is that kind of what you're asking?
More or less, yes, right. Like, if somebody's looking for a finance coach and that finance coach earns half of what they earn, it might be
Yeah.
a little hard, you know what I mean? and you are so
Yeah.
much more physically impressive than so many people. Do you find that ever hard to say, hey, I'm not going to take advice from this person because they haven't even done what I've achieved?
No, not. I mean, I guess I can understand where that mindset could come in. For me personally, I think, you know, I th- I just understand I have my competencies and my I'm good at certain things. I think with, coaching myself, I definitely am probably not the best. I'm just a fan on leaning on others and learning from others. I'm constantly taking in new information. Like I said, I listen to your podcast with Steve and Eric. I like listening to the 3DMJ stuff a lot. I like to listen to a ton of people online, YouTubers like RP Strength, Mike Israetel. Like
Yeah.
I'm constantly just taking in new information from people, and I think, I pick and choose from, information that passes my BS detector test. Maybe I'll try it out, maybe a training hack or some nutrition advice. With my coach with bodybuilding personally, his name's Paul Ravella.
Right.
He owns Team Pro Physique, primarily coaches women's bikini, but he'll every once in a while take on a guy who's into natural bodybuilding because Paul is a pro natural bodybuilder himself. Um, I trust him because he's had his eye on the sport for much longer than me. He knows what judges look for. I think he has a great eye and an ability to just be honest with, speaking personally for myself. He knows what to say, how to say it. I think he doesn't pull any punches, and I think he's conservative isn't in his approach. And ultimately, I think I would be worse off if I coached myself. I like the fact that I can outsource that and I can kind of just shut my brain off and kind of just follow what he says instead of second guessing everything that I'm doing. So that was kind of a very roundabout answer, but to answer
No, no,
your
I
question,
think it's good. Well, it's good because I mean, to be honest, like the most successful people that I know are often delegating some of these things to other people and find mentors and coaches to do it. I mean, genuinely, like I have friends who make very high incomes and they have a coach in several different areas and somebody who is very fit who has a coach in other areas. I mean, it's just that's what I tend to see is the people who just go at it alone. Not that there's, I mean, there's obviously exceptions, and I know there's some very successful in this context competitors who do it themselves, but it does seem like most people I know do look to others. One, it can help de-stress it. Two, second eye on things, and three, obviously, you're paying for the experience of how many people they've, gone through a similar process with.
yeah, man. I mean, you know, this is such a passion of mine, and I think I'm something that helps me. I think is just a willingness to be curious and to learn and to just have an insatiable urge to just learn more. I like just like taking in information. I'm curious what different training methodologies other natural bodybuilders are doing. I'll read their captions, I'll read up on what they're doing, pay attention to the UK natural bodybuilder scene. Like,
Mm.
okay, these guys train super intense. Why are they doing it this way? Like, I'm just curious, man. And like all the while, just like, does this pass my BS detector? Like, does this reign true for me? Like, I know for me personally, like, I train high volume, I train hard. I arguably could do less work,
Yeah,
but it's it's given me the results that I have. So I
yeah,
don't, if it's almost like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So,
sure.
but like, so I listen a lot though. I take in a lot.
Well, and then you mentioned like you look at other naturals, but even enhanced guys, right? Like you mentioned Dr. Mike, right? Mike Israetel and
Sure.
everything. And you actually trained with him, I believe, right? For a little bit.
I did in, yeah, at the Arnold Expo in Ohio back in March. I linked up with them and they murdered me on a leg day. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I do wonder, I think you had kind of alluded to this. I do wonder how much they're training like that all the time versus it's like, hey, like let's just put this person through hell kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that.
Yeah, yeah.
They're doing their marketing.
Sure, sure. So with the volumes that you're doing, because I think you had said, was it 15 to 25 sets per body part per week?
Hmm.
Okay, so that's between the two, because you're hitting each muscle group twice a week, right?
Yeah,
On average. Okay, so that was a total weekly volume then.
sure. Yeah.
Okay. Which I mean, your split is it, if I'm remembering correctly, it was like a push-pull legs upper lower, is that right?
Yep.
Which I think is an awesome way to do it. When I was looking at the volumes, it didn't seem crazy, crazy high, but when you also factor in the amount of weight you're using, I'm sure the stimulus and just the overall recovery load for the body is a lot. So obviously this is
Mhm.
now what you do basically full time. But do you ever find like you just need to step back and deload from all that?
Absolutely, man. Actually, the way I've been doing it the last couple of years is I kind of have a 1 month slash 4 week rotating cycle where I'll deload every fourth week. And that's coming up for me next week. So this
Okay.
week for me, I've got a posterior chain leg day after this call that I've been dreading all
Okay.
day because this is my like set some volume PRs week, or at least that's the goal. Some
Yeah,
training
yeah.
cycles I don't do it, but yeah, I kind of at this point I really have to pull back on the reins and give myself some space every 3 to 6 weeks, or I'm just like I feel like a mangled mess. I feel like
Yeah.
my energy is low. I can't think clearly. Um, all that stuff. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel this week. Like I feel like my brain is on 70% just because of my last 3 training sessions.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny thinking about the leg day because I even back in high school I had some very grueling leg days and they were always Saturday and by like Wednesday and Thursday I'm already thinking about it like oh that's coming up and so yeah I
Yeah, man.
definitely understand.
Yeah, I think you've got to have a little bit of fear surrounding your leg days, or maybe they're not hard
Right.
enough. I don't know.
Right. The every 4 week deload is interesting because I saw that more, man, I think like Jim Wendler's 5-3-1 when that was popular many years back and it was every
Yeah,
4 weeks and there's obviously other protocols that incorporate that. But I don't see that as often these days, like the need to deload or even just the implementation in a program to deload so often. Now
yeah,
I believe now that I'm thinking about it, I recall you mentioning so you ramped, right? And it was like a 7 out of 10 the first week, 8 or 9, and then you're basically all out that third week, right?
correct.
Yeah, which I guess allows you to, I mean, just mentally, like you're like, so if you were never deloading, and this is a conversation I've mentioned, it might have been with Steve, but with others as well, is when you get to an advanced point, and obviously you're not progressing session to session or oftentimes even week to week anymore, there is that psychological burden of like, okay, I did this last week and now I'm hitting it exactly the same again, and I'm hitting it exactly the same again. And it's like, man, if either way, as an advanced trainee, you're probably not making, leaps and bounds in your progress anymore. At least the way you have it set up, it's like, yes, you have that crazy grueling week, but then the next week is mentally you just kind of calm down. And then the next week
Mhm.
after that, it's hard, but I'm guessing you're still sounds like maybe 2 to 3 RAR at that point.
On a deload week,
No, 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 on like the first week back.
first week back, yeah, 2 or 3 RIR.
So like just mentally, it's not this hell of like I'm just every set, every workout is just pushing. So I guess that probably
Uh,
allows you to go even harder on that final week because all right, this week I'm killing it, but then I get a little bit of release.
yeah, yeah. I think having an end in mind, knowing that I'm not just perpetually just like ramming my head against the wall each week and not deloading kind of gives me that motivation. And I, the cycle has worked for me. Week one, just kind of easing back into it. Week two, okay, things are getting a little bit more intense. I also throughout the weeks lower the rep range. Like on my main lifts, week one, I'll be in like the 12 to 15 rep range. Week two, I'll be in the 8 to 12. Week three, I'll be in the 6 to 10.
Yeah.
So I
Okay.
like hitting some various different rep ranges, and then getting closer to failure. Yeah, and sometimes I've deloaded like on week on week three because I went too hard on week two, or
Oh,
I've
really?
pulled back the reins early, and sometimes I felt like I had more in the tank, or maybe I missed a session because of life on that
Yeah.
third week, so I've pushed it back. I'm intuitive with my training in that way. It's
Yeah.
more so like on average, it's that fourth day,
Okay.
but yeah, I just think given the loads that I select, the way that I like to train, I just think it's unrealistic. It's unrealistic for me with
Yeah.
my recovery and just the nervous system fatigue and spinal fatigue just to like prepare. Like after this week, I know I can't show up next week at the gym and likely even match what I've done this week.
Right.
I just think maybe I could match it, but even then, like my CNS will just be tanking even further, and I'll just be so it's the
Yeah, in
only
a
option,
sense, it's
really.
almost like, there's some discussions that when we're talking about volume within a set, and people will say, well, hey, if every set is to failure, then I'm not going to be able to like, I'm mentally just you're going to pull back, or if I'm doing super high volume, I'm going to pull back, and you're kind of extrapolating that over, let's say, like a month, where it's like, maybe for that week you can still do it, but again, over that whole month, you still have a similar pattern where I know my limits, and then I can kind of basically have a gradation there so that you can push when needed.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Right.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Do
fun.
you, as far as the recovery aspect, obviously most people, especially in the natural world, know that, if you're enhanced, of course, there's a lot that can be taken for recovery. But as a natural athlete, a lot of it comes down to your nutrition and your sleep and whatnot, and then obviously proper programming. Do you take anything else that you feel like really helps with recovery?
Um, I mean, I will say I have gotten much more serious on sleep uh the last 2, 3 years, really, since so my last competition season in 2019, I was kind of I was in a hustle phase where I was just like working a lot. I was working with way more one-on-one clients. I was basically just like trying to make it in Los Angeles more or less. And I was just like burning the candle at both ends. And
Yeah,
I don't think I realized it at the time how much I was just limiting my potential. So long story short, and definitely moving out of Los Angeles and being in Denver, has helped a bunch, but and just having more of a routine and a schedule is dude, I need like 8.5 hours a night of just
yeah,
like actually being asleep, which translates to like 9 hours in
right,
bed
right
at
in
night.
bed,
And I'm very blessed to work for myself or work from home, and I can afford to do that. Um, but that's number one, dude. It's just like the sleep situation, unwinding, I'm not always perfect, but like, keeping the lights relatively low, 30
yeah,
minutes before bed, like all the stuff that we hear from sleep doctors and the Andrew Hubermans online. Like
right.
I try my best to do it,
It's
man.
tough,
Like
man. It's tough.
it's really hard, dude. It's hard. Like, but like, I've got my night mode on the phone by like 7 or 8 p.m. Like I've got all that going. Cool room, as dark as possible,
Right.
wear an eye mask if I need to. So like dude, that's really number one. I think what also helps me a bunch is outside of weight training, I'm not super active. Like I'm pretty much like working at the computer, putzing around the house, running
Yeah.
errands here and there. I've got a pretty simple life. Like, I've got a wonderful girlfriend, Erin. But what I don't have outside of that, we've got a couple animals. I don't have kids. So like
Yeah. Yeah.
life is pretty simple for me, I think, at this point. A lot of times I just leave the house to go to the gym and then come home.
Right.
So like I can kind of live this like monk mode bodybuilder life in a way. I feel
Yeah.
like my
Sure.
lifestyle is designed in a way that kind of favors like the center of my day is almost like my weight training. And outside
Right.
of that, it's just like working at the computer. Maybe
Yeah.
I'll go on a hike on the weekend or whatever, but that's that's what helps me the most with recovery, man, is like, and is this helpful for the listener? I don't know. Maybe it is, but like, that's the question is like, can you design and shift some things in your schedule in a way where you can, I don't know, favor recovery, be on your feet less? Like, there's no supplement I take per se. I mean, I obviously take my creatine, I'll get caffeine in during the day, protein shake if I'm having trouble hitting my protein, which I often do. But outside of that, man, there's nothing
Yeah. Keep it simple.
miraculous I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, same. I do take creatine. I never notice anything from creatine. I take it because it's super cheap, and there is
Sure,
good evidence for it. But
for
and then
sure.
yeah, like fish oil, whey protein, if you count that, but nothing crazy
Right.
there. But yeah, the sleep thing, I'm with you on the 8 hours. I don't know how people. I know some people who consistently, not like once in a while, consistently get 5 to 6 hours. And I know I just told you earlier, I woke up
Nope.
at 3:30 today, but that's unusual. And I'll probably go to sleep very early today to try to make up for it. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
8 hours, even seven, I can like do it, but the people who are consistently getting way less than that, I don't know how they're functioning.
Yeah, I don't know, man. And for me, I consider this too. I'm like, is it a chicken or the egg scenario? Is it like, do I need all this sleep because I'm training so hard, or
Sure.
like what's the deal? But like I've been training pretty dang hard each week as long as I can remember. And as long as I can remember too, my sleep demands have been pretty high. I've ignored it through many phases, like I said, but
Right, right.
yeah, man, like I don't know, dude. Like I feel like a shell of myself. Like if I have that rare day, which we all do, where I've only gotten 4 or 5 hours of sleep, like the next day is just not a good situation for me.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. Sometimes I can I'll call it beat the fatigue. So this is what happened today. I was supposed to be doing legs now, but then I woke up at 3:30 and I will, if this happens and I have the time to do it, I will do my workout as soon as I get up. And when I say beat the fatigue, it's basically like before I realize how tired I am, because initially I can't sleep. So I'm like, all right, I'm getting up. If I
Sure.
wait until like let's say the planned 2 p.m. or whatever to work out, I'm just out of
Yeah.
it. And so I'm like, let me try to
Yeah.
get this in. And when I do that for one workout, it's not bad. If that were to continue, then yeah, it's not good. But thankfully I've
Yeah,
been able
man.
to do it for like a single day at least.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. Especially on those days where you didn't get a lot of sleep. The later, like whatever that concept is, like do your hardest task earlier in the day.
Hmm.
Like the later training gets pushed off, the more than likely. Like for me, if it's getting past like 2 or 3 p.m., it's like less than a 50-50 shot that I'm getting that session in.
Yeah, yeah. So briefly just on the like social media and the phone thing, you're obviously very connected to it all, right? You got a huge following on Instagram, and now this is what you do. I have definitely, unfortunately, noticed a bit of, I mean, we'll just call it like a phone addiction, where I'm noticing now that if I just have any little bit of free time, I'm just kind of looking at the phone. And that's definitely something I think I should probably work on. And I notice that when I get in bed, I just want to have 10 minutes to just unwind and just go like on Instagram or something. And I don't spend a ton of time on social media, but for me, it's always constant podcast, constant work, constant something. And so like it just feels very nice to just get in bed and be on my phone, even though I know I shouldn't. So with this being literally what you do, I wonder
Yeah.
how much you struggle with that, especially because you can kind of justify it as more work, right? Like, hey, I'm posting, that's
Yep.
work. So like how do you deal with that?
That's an active challenge, man, that I'm working through right now. And I literally, within the maybe not the last week, the last 2 weeks, I've downloaded a couple apps that I am going to test out. And this is just goes with my curiosity with weight training. Always try, I'm just trying to get better, man. Like so many guys, like young, ambitious guys who want to make the most out of life. Like I'm trying to get better. For me, dude, consumption is a huge challenge. And so I downloaded a couple apps. There's one called Atoms by James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits.
Hmm.
Atoms is a habit tracking app that I'm going to try out. It's a new one. I'm going to have a couple habits that are centered around like screen time. And then there's another one. Um, what is it called? Opal, OPAL. That's basically like it's like a screen time app limiter that I think is a bit more robust than just the innate like screen time that you can easily bypass on your phone.
Right.
Because just like you said, like I rely on social for marketing and I can catch myself a lot of times during the day just in like I get caught in the algorithm and 20 minutes, 30 minutes goes by, or I'm listening to a podcast like this conversation that we're having, and I can justify it because it's educational. It's in the field
Sure.
that I'm interested in. I can get a nugget from it, but then a lot of times I can be ending my day with kind of this ambient anxiety, kind of this sort of unease where it's like
Yes.
I feel like I haven't connected with myself. I feel like I've just, and it's because the majority of the day I've been in this phase of consumption. I've either been working, interfacing with clients, or like taking in some sort of media. And I think that in the next 2 to 5 years is going to be a big focus for people in the health and wellness space and just personal development spaces. We need to reduce this addiction to like taking in stuff. I can
Yeah.
sense it within myself. Um, more time just like so last thing I'll say is like what I'm trying out this week is nothing on the radio or like no podcast or anything when I'm driving, like anywhere. It just like
Right.
silence there. And when I go on a walk, when I walk the dog, no AirPods, just like walking.
Mm.
Um, and like that is hard, dude. Like it's been
Oh
hard for
yeah.
me because I'm so like accustomed to that, but I weirdly have this week felt better and felt like I'm more on task and focused when I've just like, dude, just like let your brain
Yeah,
drift around and like it's almost embarrassing how hard and how like much of like a willpower flex it's had to be just to like not turn something on.
for sure, man. No, it's something I deal with too, and I question, and obviously we're getting a little off from like bodybuilding here, which is fine because I think it's
Yeah,
interesting, but it's something that like for me, I have a hard time sleeping now if I don't have Audible or something going because my mind just races to a million different things. And so it's really actually hard for me to sleep. And then there's also a whole concept that some of these things, it is really false productivity that's truly procrastination. So like checking emails, listening to a podcast. It's like, okay, if this is the 100th podcast you've heard on this topic, did you really glean anything from it, or is it just making you feel like it's, but really, for all intents and purposes, you might have well just been scrolling TikTok because it's just more
100%.
content. And I know that happens with me too. And not that it's all bad. I mean, again, I get a ton out of certain podcasts I listen to, but it's
Sure.
tough. Yeah, I don't know the last time I just like went on an hour walk in nature and just didn't have anything with me.
I know. I know, man. And that's the dangerous thing is like a lot of it is so easily justified. Like, well, there's a meet there's a reason why I'm listening to this, but yeah, I think we're gonna find, and obviously I don't have any science or like PMIDs to back this up, but and I'm sure they're out there, but like
Yeah.
just like let your mind intentionally calm down and still for like 30 minutes to an hour a day without just like be conscious without consuming, I think will help us process and just like reduce stress. I don't know why, but I felt it. I have felt it within myself. Like I know that's a thing that's important and it can translate to fitness.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. There was a podcast clip between Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson. And I don't know if you know one or both of those
Yeah, I
people,
listen to
but
both of them.
yeah. And Sam Harris was saying like the average person, I mean, you could have a gun to their head. You could say the fate of the world rests on this, but you cannot have a thought. And the average person couldn't go more than 5 to 10 seconds. I mean, it's just that stillness and that oneness and just being in the moment. Man, it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, I have his app waking up and that's actually
Yeah, yeah.
something I'm gonna I'm gonna I'm gonna get back into it now
Yeah.
that we're
Well, we'll have
talking about
to
this.
connect in like a month and I'll have to see how you're doing with it.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm gonna try to keep the car thing going and the walk thing going. We'll see what the next steps will be.
So, do you find, I know you talked a little bit in the podcast with Steve about the psychology of lifting and the psychological benefits of it. One of the things that I found, and again, I probably should get back to this, is when I was younger and, I would say even more ambitious with the lifting, where like I didn't know my potential yet, and I'm just like really trying to get everything out of it. And I remember it was just the one place where I just didn't think about anything else. So I was still thinking about the lift itself. And the reason I remember this was because there was a girl I had a crush on. I'm like 15 years old. And I remember a thought about her creeped into my mind, and I was so surprised because I was like, this does not happen during my workouts, right? So I was like, wait, I gotta focus. But the point being that it was such an unusual thing, and that during that time, it was just lifting. And actually, as I even say this now, I do think I want to try to focus more on the lift while I'm there and not get distracted. But
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, that's a therapy in a sense, because it's like whatever else is going on, whatever job stress, relationship stress, anything. And I've heard Dave Tate talk about this years ago on T Nation. It's like, look, like I might not be as strong as I used to be, but I still need this in my life. And you might
hmm
not understand it. You might not understand why I'm pushing this to an 11 out of 10, but I need it. And I just would be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. I can't really understate how important the gym is for me psychologically. It's like church in a way. And I'm not, obviously philosophically you don't derive the same like insights as you would having like a routine in faith, but like I was raised Catholic. My dad was and my parents are very involved in the church. I had to be at church every Sunday at 8 a.m. And like it was a place that I went and I was able to be in a different environment and I was able to be with my thoughts and reflect and sort through problems. And again, I'm not saying that faith in church is anything like just like being in a weight room. It's different, but there are parallels in the sense where like the gym is a place where I go to where the goal is improvement. The goal is getting better, challenging myself. It's a new environment. It's often if you're lucky, a positive environment. You see some people that you get along with, hi, like how you doing? Or so that's positive. You're by yourself. You have these time in between sets where you can just sit and reflect and think, and maybe you get a new perspective on a problem you've been dealing with that you couldn't sort out just from sitting in your office. And there's something really powerful with that where I think for me it's something that's spiritual. It's like I can go there, I'm focused on getting better, I'm improving myself physically, I'm getting all these feel good chemicals like neurologically like dumping, um and I can I have a much better outlook and mindset now that I'm like 3 sets into this workout and the blood is flowing and I'm upright and I'm moving around and I'm feeling so much more lively than I was a couple hours ago, just kind of like sitting here doing this thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And like, yeah, man, it's so powerful, and that transfers to after the gym. You feel accomplished from the workout. Perhaps you had a great workout. Even if it was just like a whatever workout, you mentally feel better. You feel better to take on the day. You've at least done one great thing for that day.
Yep.
So, yeah, man, yeah, it's just as much of a mental benefit as physical.
Have you thought at all about the psychology and the effects of one day, like you're still going up in the ranks? And I mean, obviously at 33 after 15 plus years, things are slowing down, but have you at all pondered about what's it going to be like when this eventually slowly regresses? And that also, for me, I'll say like one of the reasons that I don't want to be enhanced is that the fall from grace, so to speak, is
Sure.
so stark. I just don't even know how I could deal with that psychologically to just lose
Oh
like
yeah.
30, 40 pounds of muscle. At least with natural
Yeah.
bodybuilding, you can kind of stay in peak muscularity until 50s or so.
Right.
And some of these guys are still maybe not peak, but still crushing it at 60. So I imagine that's somewhat of a reason for you to stay natural too. But you ever think about when that you won't keep going up?
Yeah. Yeah. I think about that from time to time. Honestly, man, like in a way, like I don't really care about natural bodybuilding, to be honest. Like I care about it, but I care way more about like realizing the potential that I feel I have and getting better and really challenging myself, like and not being satisfied with where I'm at currently. Again, like I said, like I'm 33. I know I'm kind of at like almost the peak of the mountain here, like at least genetically. Um, but um, but like it doesn't scare me at all from the sense that like, oh, like I won't be as heavily muscled potentially by my mid to late 40s or my 50s. Like what I care about is that I'm still hitting it and I'm still challenging myself um to be at my best and to make myself proud. And also like I'm realistic, man. Like I'm not gonna make it mean something about myself if in my late 40s or early 50s I'm not able to deadlift what I can now. Like whatever, man, like it's
Yeah,
fine. Like it is what it is. What I care about most is like I'm still being consistent. I'm still like honoring my body by training and taking care of it. And I still feel great. Um, there is some ego payoff by knowing like I already know at that age I'm going to be in better shape than 99% of people.
sure, sure.
That's fine.
Yep.
Like it doesn't need to mean something about myself if I'm not like at the top in natural bodybuilding. That's fine.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's a great mindset. Do
Whatever.
you see any sort of transition into, I know you said you weren't too interested in powerlifting and you had maybe tried a little bit of powerlifting training. Do you
Yeah.
see yourself getting into any sort of other physical endeavor? Obviously, like, a lot of people, they get into jujitsu, they get into whatever other thing, anything that interests you currently?
You know, I've had a friend, Sam. I don't know if you know who Sam Okinola is. freaking huge natural bodybuilder.
Yeah.
He placed fifth in the heavyweights at Worlds. He's been the world champion before. He just completed a 100-mile
Yeah,
ultra
yeah.
marathon.
Do you know Pete Rubish?
Yeah,
Pete Rubish was just on my podcast, and he was saying, so he did that 100-mile run. He didn't finish it, but he was
no
training with
way.
Sam. Sam was his whatever they call that, where he's like,
Yeah.
leading him or whatever. So I know him through that.
Pete Rubish, the crazy deadlifter,
Yeah, yeah.
OG YouTube guy.
Yeah, so
Holy
he's
crap.
he's natural now, and he's come off for a few years. Obviously, lost a ton of size, and as we just talked about, that's very hard to deal with. So he kind of put his energy towards ultra running. So yeah, we just released that podcast a couple weeks ago. So now he's just getting back into more serious lifting. But yeah, same guy.
Yeah, for me, I think there's so much to be said about enjoyability. And at this stage in the game, I really do enjoy my weight training. I love the way it makes me feel. I love the way it makes me look. Obviously, I still have some goals within competing that may carry me into my late 30s or early 40s. We'll see. I'm very much not like, I don't like speaking things into like existence in the sense that I want to box myself in. Anything can happen, but I know at least maybe for the next 10 years, I do want to stay in the bodybuilding space, but I did grow up as an endurance athlete.
Mhm.
I ran cross country, ran track, also was a soccer player. So um, I was obsessed in high school with improving my 5K time,
Okay.
and
What was your best
and
5K?
1703,
Wow. Nice.
1703. So I can see myself getting back into a type of like hybrid training where it's like doing like tough mudders and stuff like that. I don't know about the ultra marathons, but yeah, I could see myself getting back into like some endurance, maybe doing some triathlons. Um, maybe not so much like jujitsu or BJJ, just because I don't want to get injured. I feel like a lot
Yeah,
of those guys get injured,
definitely.
but my goal is staying healthy, bro. That's my
Yeah.
goal. Like, don't get injured. I think that's been a big help with me with weight training. Is like I've trained in a way where I've never gotten injured with weight training, like a serious injury. Like
Yeah,
I've
that's
gotten those
great.
like aches and pains here and there, like
Sure.
anyone, but like I'm team stay healthy and feeling powerful. That's where
Yeah.
I'm at. So
Yeah, it's interesting to see. There's quite a number of guys who have come from a more endurance background. Steve Hall used to be an endurance
yeah,
guy. Do you know Jeffrey Schofield? Jeffrey Verdi Schofield.
yeah, I've
He's
seen
got
him pop. He's been popping up in my algorithm a lot. I need to
yeah, yeah,
watch
yeah.
some of his
He's
stuff.
blown up a lot. So he's a very impressive natural, and he used to be like I think like all cardio guy. Like and those guys, you look at them and you wouldn't know. I mean, naturally lean, but it just kind of goes to show. I mean, you really don't know your potential until you
Yeah,
start. Because I think there's the assumption like, oh, well, like the person who's a naturally good wrestler or football player, that's who's going to be a good bodybuilder. But I see it with endurance guys all the time.
yeah. Yeah. Steve and I briefly touched on this. I really do think there's something to be said for building work capacity in like a cardio respiratory sense with a lot of like the ability to respond well to weight training. I think it is in some way correlated to like build your ability to struggle and suffer and work hard and be efficient with oxygen with like with a sport with whether it's swimming or whether it's soccer or whatever, gymnastics or wrestling. Like I think there is a big transfer. I think
Yeah.
there's a big transfer there.
What I think was interesting because I know Steve doesn't care too much about strength. And then same thing with like Jeff Schofield. I think he cares a little bit, but Jeff was somebody who his size was always significantly more impressive than his strength. And I'm the total opposite. I was always much stronger than I looked. And actually, I remember even hearing your stats, and I thought it was really interesting because you were, I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, but if I'm remembering your best squat, you were squatting like 45 for reps or something like that.
Yeah, 45. My best is 545 for 2 reps
Wow, which is obviously very strong. Deadlift was 600 for a few reps, something like that.
for 5 or 6. Yeah.
Yeah, also super strong. Your bench press is sh strong, and I remember you said that that was the lift you were most proud of, right? Because I think maybe it took the most
Yeah,
work. Was that why?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and which is funny because I said that about my squat. My squat was absolutely my worst lift, But my PR, my squat was the one I was most proud of because it was like, man, like my deadlift just kind of came pretty quickly. By the time I was 20, 21, I had a triple bodyweight deadlift, but my squat was just, I just took forever to get it up at all. Um,
Yeah.
bench press was kind of in between. And this is where that genetic variability is so interesting to me. So your best bench, I think, was 315 for six, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I can't do this today, but I have benched 315 for three. And I think you must have 40 pounds of muscle on me. You know, I mean, a lot, whatever the
Yeah.
number is, it's a lot. And so for those numbers to be so close, obviously with strength, there's a lot of other components than just the actual size of the muscle. But I found it very interesting because you do see some of these guys like Lane Norton's another one, good bench, but super high squat and deadlift. And like some of
Yeah.
these kind of like lower body almost specialists. I think Candido, Johnny Candido, if you know him,
Yeah.
same thing, like decent bench, crazy squat and deadlift. So it's just interesting to see the variability.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's almost like you can have, I don't know, someone tagged me, or Steve, I think, tagged me in something yesterday saying like with natural bodybuilding, you can either be big, it's like you can pick two of three. It's like
Yes. Yeah.
heavily muscled, shredded, or what was the other one?
Well, usually
It's like
it's natural. So it's like big, lean, and natural.
big, lean,
Um,
and natural. You can pick two,
big two.
but you
Yes.
can have all three. It's
Yes.
I feel like with squat, bench, deadlift, it's almost similar,
Yeah.
where one of them is trying to play catch up. Or like oftentimes in bodybuilding, if a guy has a very impressive like chest and shoulders and like front relaxed, like maybe their back's not as impressive. Like it's much more rare to see like a crazy impressive like chest and shoulders and also back.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, man, I don't know that, and there's something else there where it's like I know for me, maybe this is what the story I tell myself that makes sense in my brain is because I grew up as someone who was more of like an endurance athlete. I feel I'm great in the 6 to 10 rep range with loads, but I'm because maybe I'm slow twitch muscle fiber dominant, but like I wasn't raised as like an explosive football player where it's like
Yeah.
a lot of like NFL players or something you see highlights in the gym like they're crazy strong with like 1 to 3 rep maxes, but for them 6 to 10 reps is cardio. It's like
Yeah.
crazy.
100%. Yeah.
Like for me, my deadlift PR is 635, and that was a huge struggle. But like I could do 600 for five or
Right.
six.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like I feel like if I did a calculator online, like
Yes.
what's my running
Exactly.
max, it would say like, oh, you can deadlift 700 pounds. And I'm like, F you, I know I can do that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I
So
was always that way. Deadlifts, I do wonder if that is even exacerbated with deadlifts because I don't know how you specifically perform your deadlifts, but because there's a little bit of a reset, I feel like the calculators are maybe not quite as accurate. But even across the board, my
fair.
lifts, if you looked at my 10 rep maxes, it's like exactly you said, my 1 rep max is this. And it's like, I know, I know it's
No,
not,
it's not that.
unfortunately. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, if only.
Right, right. So the last thing I just wanted to touch on was a little bit more with the volume aspect. So obviously over the years, I mean, as long as I've been in the industry, there's this discussion on high volume, low volume. I think for the most part, we all kind of know a lot of volumes can work, a lot of rep ranges can work, but some do work better for others. And it does seem like the preponderance of evidence does suggest that higher volumes are at least worth trying because there's almost no studies showing that lower volumes are superior, right? Maybe they're neutral, but most seem to favor higher volumes. Did you just kind of start at a relatively higher volume, or did you say, "Hey, I'm going super low and I'm going to ramp it up and I'm just going to keep ramping it as long as the results are good"? Like, how did you actually get to the conclusion of almost, 20 plus sets per body part?
Man, I think I definitely erred on the side of doing more and just like being ignorant in the gym for my first couple of years, just being a sponge, taking in information. I think I just come and also coming from an athletic background, I was heavily associated with like, am I sweating? Is the pump there? Do I feel like I'm drained by the time I'm leaving the gym? And just from being an athlete and having a relatively high work capacity, like I would get, 4 or 5 exercises in, and I'd be like, oh, I can do like 2 or 3 more. So I would like throw in some isolation stuff. So I was just like, from the beginning, I was doing like 8 to 10 exercises per session,
Oh, well,
like 25 to 30 sets. I don't do that much work at this point anymore. A little bit less because the loads are much heavier. But yeah, I was definitely erring on the side of just like gassing myself out, like pushing myself super hard. Like I think I had that mental association with like, at the end of a soccer game, like average soccer player, we run 6 to 8 miles a game. Like I'm freaking drained and I'm associated like I'm tanked from that, like a 5K after cross country. Like I'm super drained. Like after those organized sports were done and I was like all into the gym, I kind of carried that. It's like by the end of my training session, I want to be like super gassed out. Like I put
Yeah,
it
yeah.
out all out there on the line. So I definitely
So you've never even really done like a low volume Mike Mentzer
never,
kind of thing ever. Wow.
never, no.
Interesting.
Um, could I benefit from that? Maybe. I don't know. I, I don't know, man. Like these days, like I get where it comes from, and like I love the science-based community. I think they're misunderstood. I think they get made fun of a lot by like the bro bodybuilders. There's
Yeah,
almost like two camps online these days. It's like the bros and like the science-based, and the bros think the science-based guys are pussies, and the science-based guys think the bros are just like dumb meatheads. And
yeah.
like there's a median we can find. But one of my gripes, I think, with the optimal training bros, I don't think they're actually science-based. I think they just like identifying with that camp. I think they nitpick and like everything is junk volume if it's too much. And it's almost like they're like subconsciously looking for a reason to not work as hard.
Right,
I
right.
think there's a handful of guys that are like that. And my thought process is like, why don't you pick up an insurance policy for like your gains and just maybe err on the side of doing too much?
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
sure.
is it that bad? Like, oh, you're a little more tired, or maybe you need a little extra recovery. That's just information at the end of the day. You can implement on that in the next
Right.
week or the month after. Don't don't fixate on like, I don't know, man. It's just like maybe I'm a little defensive because I
Yeah,
get
I know,
picked on
right.
from time to time in my like DMs and my comment section,
Yeah.
like, you do 3 variations of squat. That's ridiculous. And I want to just be like, bitch, I'm the world champion. Don't talk to me
Yeah,
like
man, just send a picture of your quads.
and I know that's a stupid way to respond, obviously, but like I I just think in general, like you've gotta how do you know what you're capable of if you're not pushing that barrier? Like definitely there's such thing as too much, 100%.
Yeah.
But I don't think a lot of people find that. I don't think they work hard enough to find what that is.
Yeah, it's funny you say it's a stupid way to respond, and of course, from a scientific standpoint, like that does not count for anything necessarily. But
Sure.
I don't necessarily think it's a stupid way to respond in the sense that it's almost like when Mike Israetel got crapped on for saying that he could have made Ronnie Coleman's legs bigger if he got him to squat deeper and everything. It's like
I remember that. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if
Yeah,
like there is something to be said for being able to show the results. And even if it's not
sure.
necessarily what you recommend for all your clients, it obviously
Right.
has worked, right? I mean, and especially if you're literally the best. Like, it's one thing if it's like, well, your 80th percentile, you could have gotten to 90th percentile. But if you're 100th percentile, I mean, it's kind of hard to argue.
Yeah. 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 And everything I say here, I mean, I'm just speaking from like very much personal experience and like you've got to be curious enough. And I think as much as you can, self-aware enough to like just be honest with yourself, man. Like what's working and what's not. Like if over the years, bro, like I was hitting like 15, 20 sets per muscle group per week, and like I felt like I was spinning the wheels and I was not making progress month over month. And I was like feeling like crap outside of the gym. And I was slowly becoming not motivated to go to the gym. And I just had this intuitive knowing that I was doing too much. Like I wouldn't be doing this much. Like I just
Right,
wouldn't
right.
for no reason. But I've responded very well to this style of training. I don't go to failure all the freaking time. I take all the rest I need to in between sets. Um, and there's also something to be said. Like I post my best sets on the internet, like most people do. Like when I post a lot of my workouts, which opens myself to scrutiny and like, oh, this is so much work.
Hmm.
Like, how are you doing this? Like, I'm showing my best sets like from that session.
Right,
Like
right.
maybe the set afterwards, like it was like, I had to cut it halfway because I felt I was doing too much or that it was too heavy. So like there's something to be said there, but
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you've got to find your own, be willing to learn, but it's got to pass your BS detector test. Like try it and I think err on the side of working harder.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
can always pull back.
Do you now you primarily coach at this point? What was your main, I guess, like business?
Yeah, so I I have all my programs through Trainerize, which is like you may have heard of Trainerize. A lot of people use this as a it's a mobile platform that any trainer can basically put their programs on and kind of start their business. So I have programs that I sell online that are you go through it on your own and it's a subscription on the app. That's one level that's much more affordable than one-on-one coaching for a lot of people, a lot of young
Right.
guys,
Yep.
young girls. And then I also do one-on-one coaching, not heavy in the competition space at all,
Okay.
primarily just like general population. Um, and that's what I do. I've got help also from sponsors, my core nutritionals supplement sponsorship and Young LA clothing, which is like, kind of just icing on the cake that helps through social media. But yeah, that's what I'm doing day in and day out. Like I love it, man. I eat, sleep, and
Yeah.
breathe training and yeah.
Do you see yourself? Because you get some guys again, like a Steve Hall, where they start with coaching and they've stayed with coaching, and he's really built a name for himself now. And obviously he's works with a lot of competitors, but Gen Pop as well. And then you have others like big timers, Jeff Nippert and Renaissance Periodization, everything, who at some point they had coaching, and then they've kind of, I don't even want to say graduated, they've just shifted paths to something else that maybe doesn't involve as much face-to-face time with clients, customers, however you want to say it. Do you see yourself staying in one-on-one coaching and whatnot for a long time, or you see yourself going somewhere else?
At this time I do. I actually am going to start taking on one-on-one clients in person at our gym
Oh,
shortly here in Denver called Transform. Just because I like working with people one-on-one, man. I like it's super rewarding for me and I like seeing the results. Um, Not to poo-poo on like working with clients online that I, don't interface with on a weekly basis. Like I sell programs online and I'm super grateful to be able to do that. However, there's more of a payoff and reward selfishly for me, like with one-on-one clients. Like I can talk to them week on week. I can see their results. I can see the progress photos. But even with working with clients online, like there's a limitation and and I'm and I feel like it's going to be even more rewarding, like having, two or three clients in the morning just to like work with in person. That's really where my passion is, man. Just like helping people realize what health and wellness can do to you, like how much your world can shift by losing 20, 30 pounds. Like that's that's what's super fun for me.
yeah.
So like and I'm blessed to have a big social platform where I kind of have a buffer where I can sell programs and have the flexibility to kind of choose what I want to do. I don't, have to meet a quota each month of like I have to take on certain one-on-one clients or
Right.
whatever. So yeah,
Yeah.
I this is something I've done for the last 8 years. I don't plan on stopping. And I went to school and I was an accountant for 5, 6 years and I hated
Oh,
doing that.
really?
So like, yeah,
Oh,
that's
wow.
that's what I went to school for. And it was kind of a soul-sucking corporate gig,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
stereotypical, just accountant in a cubicle. So I'm
Yeah.
just I'm still grateful that I escaped that.
Yeah, I had a buddy who was doing some finance work, and he actually got out of it and went to PA school, so to be a physician's assistant.
Oh, nice.
And it's hard, but it's I think a lot more meaningful. Not that we don't need accountants in this world, but it is different.
Really.
And I'll say even for me, like with treating patients, I mean, I have 2,000 patients I see, and there is definitely something to be said for the in-person interactions. And sometimes if you're doing too much, it can feel like, oh, I just want to step away. But this is what happens with a lot of people when they retire, and then they don't know what they're retiring to, and then it's just like, oh, like what do you do? And you don't realize how much those day-to-day, the in-person interactions, the positive feedback from people can actually really enhance your life if you just don't go too crazy with it. So I think that's awesome that you're going to take people in person too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm super excited. So do you do that as well? Are you in person? Do you have a
So well, I mean, I have my patients, of course, in my practice, and then
yeah.
I do online coaching. I don't do any like gym coaching. I actually just ended my gym membership. I just designed a whole home gym, and it's pretty sweet
Heck
now.
yeah.
So that's pretty cool. But yeah, so I do the online coaching, which I really like too, because it's not really a financial motivation for me, relative to obviously dentistry, but
Sure.
it is really, I only take on a handful of clients at a time. And it's great though when you have somebody who's like, hey, I've been following your stuff for years, and so like, you already kind of have this background, right? And obviously if they're reaching out to you, you know that they understand your concepts. And then when you see somebody who even like that
Sure.
incremental change over time, it's cool to see.
100%, man.
And a lot of my clients will still reach out to me in DMs and like give me updates and everything. And so you've kind of built this little community, and that's pretty cool.
Hell yeah. It's fun, man. That's so
Yeah,
cool.
it's cool. So, all right, man. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast with me. I'm glad we got to connect. This was cool. And of course,
Absolutely.
I'll have the link below to your Instagram, to the GoFundMe page. Anywhere else I should link to?
Coaching is shreddedforlife.com.
Cool, cool. All right. Thanks again, man.
Thank you, bro.